Hi, and welcome again to the show. I'm Leslie Choice, and my guest today is Carolyn Gimian. She was the editor of a book called Great Eastern Sun, and in that volume are the teachings, the writings of Chögyam Trungpa. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Leslie. It's really nice to be here today.
Yeah, and it's a great book. Perhaps you should briefly introduce us to the man.
To the man? Well, Chögyam Trungpa was born as the 11th incarnation of a Tibetan Buddhist teacher in Tibet. He left in 1959 along with a lot of other high lamas because of the communist Chinese invasion of his country, and he made his way to India and then to England. And then in 1970 he came first to Canada actually, and then went to the United States where he lived for about 17 years. And he was one of the very earliest Tibetan Buddhist teachers in the West, and I think had a really big impact on all of the understanding of Eastern religion that's now, and meditation that's now filtering more and more into the culture.
Did he have any followers back in the time when he was in the States?
In the States?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there were several thousand people who got interested in what he was teaching and became, I think, serious students of his. And he traveled around a lot. He went and would talk on university campuses, or, I mean, I first saw him actually in Colorado, but then I moved to California, and I used to go see him with 1,500 people sometimes in a big hall in San Francisco.
But then he found his way to Nova Scotia. He
Yeah.
came to Nova Scotia and stayed. What was the story behind that?
Well, it was a little bit perhaps of intuition and luck, but I think he came from a very wild place in a sense, and when he went to Colorado, it's now kind of, Boulder is a very well-known place now, but when he was there it was like on the frontier. And I think he felt that way about Nova Scotia too, that it was a place that wasn't so full already, and that it was a place where you could have a good life. I think he liked the people here. He came and visited a couple of times and then made the decision that this was where he wanted to live. And a lot of people who were interested in his teachings ended up moving here, like myself.
That's right. Many Americans moved to Nova Scotia, Halifax area, following Chögyam Trungpa. And in some ways it changed the texture of the community here in Halifax and other places. Was there any other sort of spiritual connection to Nova Scotia? I mean, was there something about this place that drew him here and then other people like yourselves?
Well, yeah, it's funny. He used to say it reminded him a little bit of Tibet in a certain way. And I have to say from my own experience of the place that I think it is, in many respects, a deeply spiritual place. It is a place where I think people are much more rooted than they are in certainly most of where I grew up in the United States now. I know lots of people who their family has been here for several hundred years, and that affects a place, I think, when you have that kind of groundedness
more permanence
and connection. Yeah, it's a sort of a connection to earth in a certain way. And I think that people here, there's a kind of gentleness, and it is slightly out of the way. It's not that it doesn't have
It's good to be on the fringe.
Well, yeah, I think it is.
Introduce me a bit to Shambhala Buddhism. Where does it come from?
Well, Buddhism itself, is ancient religion, goes back to India and Shakyamuni Buddha. Shambhala is a tradition that came out of India and Tibet originally. It was the idea of secular enlightenment, or the idea that one could have an enlightened society, and that contemplative teachings could be part of a social fabric. And so the author of this book, Chögyam Trungpa, took that idea and applied it to looking at life and offering sort of down-to-earth teachings on, you could say, how to be as a person individually, how to be a person in society. So these are both, you could say, they're in a sense old or timeless teachings. At the same time, they're pretty new and up-to-date.
Buddhism is a
way.
non-theistic religion. We were
Yeah.
talking about this earlier before the show here.
Yeah.
And that's in some ways a difficult concept for Westerners. Non-theistic implies
Right.
there is no God.
Well, it implies, in this sense, that you're much more focused because it's not atheistic, but non-theistic means more that you have to deal with your own situation as a human being, and you have to work that out. And I guess the Buddhist approach would be that there's not a lot of help available to you, that you have to work on your own situation. And so Buddhism provides, and the Shambhala teachings provide, a meditative or contemplative discipline that a person can apply to their own situation to work on the anxiety, the depression, the sadness, loneliness, things that really affect all of us. And also the idea is, in this sense, that it's a discipline that can be practiced by people who have another religion.
Yes, so you can be a Buddhist and you can be a Christian as well.
Well, you can certainly be a Shambhala practitioner, and you can be a Buddhist. I certainly know people who have done Shambhala training, which is the program that's developed out of this group of material, who are, I know a rabbi who's a Shambhala training practitioner, and I know a lot of Christians who are interested. And I think meditation is something that's being used more and more by people. They realize that it's a useful technique for working with themselves and their minds.
If we go back to the idea of Shambhala, it was a kingdom. Tell us about Shambhala way back.
Well, I mean, there's recently been this book by James Redfield on Shambhala, which sort of treats it as though it were a mystical place high in the Himalayas that you could go, right? But I think the actually traditional understanding of it is that it was a kingdom where the Buddha taught certain teachings, and it is regarded as also a place within the human heart. It's the idea of that you find the kingdom of Shambhala within your own heart and mind. So, while there are some people who think you could go out and find it out there, it has a lot more to do with in here. Yeah.
What's the Ashe principle?
The Ashe principle is the principle of power, and the principle almost of a weapon of wakefulness that you could apply in your journey as a warrior through your life. And that's the sort of hidden basis of this book. The title is Great Eastern Sun, which has to do with the sort of sun of wisdom and the sun that illuminates your experience as a human being, but at the same time there's a notion of the Ashe principle, which is like almost you could say a blade of wakefulness that cuts through habitual problems.
And this is a very important element of the book that he talks about, is the mindfulness, being fully awake. You mentioned that aspect of the warrior aspect. I assume that he's not talking about military principles necessarily here. What kind of warriors does he refer to?
I think the image is a really appropriate one for the world in which we live. We're faced with tremendous conflicts and difficulties that we have to deal with. Internally, you have problems that you have to look at, problems of speed, anxiety, all sorts of things that are going on. And externally, we have a world that's not always easy. And so the notion of warriorship in this tradition is actually the idea of those who are interested in overcoming aggression, overcoming war. It's actually the principle of victory over war is the principle of a warrior. And also the idea of the dignity. If you see images in art of, say, a Japanese samurai, or you think of something like King Arthur's knights, it's a principle of some sort of uplifted, dignified warriorship that is going to bring something good into the world rather than perpetuating further conflict.
He also writes a lot about, the wakefulness, the waking up. In what way is it that we're asleep?
Well, I think that's just a turning away from the pain of our life sometimes. And it's, he uses the image of a cocoon in this book, that it's sort of, you would like something soft and familiar to surround you and to kind of take away the hard edges. You don't quite want to get into the cold, biting air of reality. Yes. But, you know, it's kind of hard to, at a certain point, there's only so many hours that you can stay in that snuggly little bed before you actually do have to come out.
And what's what usually is the trigger that allows a person to wake up?
I think it's something, again, that you might feel it's something outside of yourself, but I think really for it to have any impact, it has to resonate with something deeply within yourself. If you try to really put yourself to sleep and anesthetize yourself, if I can say that, there's still like some little burning spark that just doesn't want to go out, and that eventually starts to almost be like an itch or something that wants to be expressed. And then if you see something, and it could be, you know, anything in your experience that's so bright and so brilliant, that you resonate with that, you pick up on that, and you realize that, well, maybe there's more to life than just being cocooned all the time.
Mm-hmm. How would Trungpa define wisdom?
Wow, that's a big,
that's a big
order. How would he define wisdom?
Is wisdom book-learned knowledge the way that we teach it in school, or something different?
No, I think it's, again, knowledge is a great thing, but there's something, I think he would define it as connecting with a state of being, and more with being wise, rather than wisdom being a thing that exists somewhere in the world.
Yes. The issue of compassion comes up again and again in the book Great Eastern Sun. And how important is this element of compassion in Shambhala Buddhism?
It's really important. I think that the only reason well, not the only reason. I mean, obviously there's a value to working on yourself and developing mindfulness and awareness and some sense of individual power. But if you don't use that to help other people in the world, at a certain point, both you and the world turn sour, I think. The world really does need a lot of help. And I think as individuals, it's just not spiritual teachings that don't connect you to a bigger world in the long run are in trouble, because the world is in so much trouble. You just can't avoid it.
In some ways, they seem like opposites. If I think of a person sitting and meditating, in one respect, it's a very selfish thing.
Yeah,
could be. You're there. You're doing this thing for yourself. You're going to maybe feel better as a result of it. You're not out actively pursuing a compassionate role of some sort. How does one relate to the other? The act of meditation and the act of going out and doing good deeds. How do they connect?
Well, meditation looks kind of passive, but at the same time it's discovery, and it's slowing down your own, the speed of your mind, and so that you can actually pay attention to what's going on in the world. If it's true meditation, I think then it connects you further. You're able to listen better to what other people have to say, and you're able to actually perceive things without so much of a storyline or a dialogue through which you filter everything. So in that sense, I think it's actually very important to helping people.
Yes. And it makes you more mindful and therefore more aware of what's going on around you.
Yeah.
Shambhala Buddhism certainly has attracted a number of people. I know I met Allen Ginsberg, interviewed him here in Halifax when he'd come to Halifax because he was interested in the teachings here. What is it that those writers and artists find attractive from these teachings and practices?
Well, I think that artists often are striving to express the same principles that are at work here. They understand, visual artists, but also composers, understand the connection between perception and sort of vividness and some sort of luminosity. And I think meaning that we kind of take things like color for granted, but art makes us really look twice, and art makes us really see things and really hear things and really experience them. And Chögyam Trungpa, especially in his Shambhala teachings, appreciated that so much and was able to speak about that with such a strong poetic voice. He also, I think, was able to connect for artists the fact that there is a path, that you don't just have to have these little highlights, that you experience art when you make art, but the rest of your life is completely messed up. You actually could be an artist as a human being. And that's, I think, what's so attractive to someone like Allen Ginsberg, what was attractive to him.
Yeah. And is are the teachings more process-oriented than product-oriented? Is there something here that suggests you lead a good life, you meditate while you follow these teachings, and then when you die you will be rewarded in some way?
No, that's a non-theistic aspect. You don't know what's going to happen to you when you die. So you need to work with what you have. And I think it is very much process oriented. It's not entirely lacking in any results, but it's things like, you know, developing a greater sense of humor about your life, which is not exactly what people think of when they think of what they're going to get out of something like this.
Yes. Okay, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with Carolyn Gimian right after this. Again, we're talking about Shambhala training, Shambhala Buddhism, the book Great Eastern Sun, and the editor, Carolyn Gimian, is here with me today. Let's go back to that title, Great Eastern Sun.
Okay.
What is that image, that metaphor? What does that mean?
Well, the sun is a powerful image in many mythologies, and it here represents the principle of wisdom and some kind of wakefulness and light or dawn that occurs in your life on a daily basis.
And the warrior training that we were speaking about before, Trungpa speaks about this idea of bravery and fearlessness. But again, I know he's not talking about jumping off a cliff or going out into battle. What kind of bravery and fearlessness is that?
Well, I think just leading your daily life requires a great deal of bravery, especially if you're willing. Why?
Some people seem to handle it rather normally. Yeah.
I think if you're willing to lean into it and look at what's actually going on and pursue your dreams, pursue what it is that you would like to do with a human life, that takes a lot of bravery. And just to be kind and to others, I think, takes a tremendous amount of strength.
Explain that a little bit more, because that's an interesting one, the kindness. Why does kindness take strength? Is it because we're basically quite selfish people and just want to take care of ourselves?
Yeah, or we're basically very insecure people, and so there's so many opportunities to be resentful of what others present to us. There's so many opportunities to be, I don't know what you can say on television, so I don't know if I can say pissed off?
Sure.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And to see beyond that and see what people are presenting to you as communication rather than an attack, I think that takes a lot of strength and bravery.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is Dharma?
What is Dharma? Well, Dharma literally means truth, or it means norm. It basically means the way things are, or what is. And it also refers to the teachings of Buddhism are called the Dharma. But you also would find, like in Japan, if you were looking at directions for how to use something, it would be the Dharma of how to do that. It's a bigger word than just a religious word.
The way of doing something?
Yeah.
Is that part of it?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I remember watching the movie, I guess it was 7 Years in Tibet. Was that the one with Brad Pitt?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. And Buddhism was a big part of that. And the monks were out in the garden, and they were they were moving the earthworms from one place to another so that the earthworms wouldn't get injured. And of course, living a life without destroying other things is an important part of the teachings of Buddha. But how do you do that? Is that possible to live a life without destroying small things, at least, around you? We consume and we improve, so-called, upon the world. How does one do that?
Well, the principle of not causing harm to others, and it's not, I think, easy to live your life entirely that way. I think you have to regard it as a journey of discovery. In Tibet, on the one hand, they would move the earthworms, but they weren't necessarily always vegetarians. There was a kind of practical aspect to Buddhism. So, for example, I'm not a vegetarian, so I have to deal with that. And I'm not supposed to kill lobsters as a Buddhist. I'm not supposed to let a
Here you are
lobster
living in Nova
be killed for me, because that would be directly taking a life. But I think the Shambhala teachings are more importantly trying to apply that in human relationships and in all relationships, sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there any particular concern in your community for the situation in Tibet today, since many of these teachings have descended from Tibet?
Yeah, I think that we don't have a, I don't think as a community we haven't taken a particular stand, but for example, the teacher who just walked out of Tibet, the 17th Karmapa, was very closely connected to our community. Chögyam Trungpa, the author of Great Eastern Sun, hosted the first visit of His Holiness the Karmapa, the last one, to the United States in the 70s. So sure, we've had traditional relationships with the Tibetans, and I was involved in protesting an art exhibit of a Chinese photographer who put up photographs from Tibet that depicted the Tibetans as a happy, completely contented people, when in fact I think their culture and their way of life has been affected horribly by the...
It's still a fairly oppressive situation, the rule of China over Tibet?
Well, in some ways, yeah, I think it's very oppressive. They're not really allowed to practice their way of life. Their culture has been largely, in some ways, the Chinese would like you to think that it's they're happy little Tibetans practicing their Tibetan folk ways. They don't really allow, however, I think the power of Buddhism to be expressed. They don't really, they give lip service to it, but they've destroyed many monasteries, and it's been very oppressive.
Right, and we're just really getting a bit more public knowledge about what's been going on there in recent years.
Yeah, I think that at the time that it happened, there wasn't any CNN, there was nobody covering the Chinese invasion of Tibet, and it was such an isolated culture and had so many medieval aspects that nobody really thought much about it or knew much about it.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I think we know about it is that these Tibetan teachers have come out of Tibet, and they have so much to say. They're obviously not primitive people by any means, and they didn't need to be liberated from some sort of unsophisticated lifestyle. They're also, they show themselves to be very kind people, so that the Chinese line for such a long time that they needed to liberate Tibet because there were these terrible because of the terrible problems with the monasteries. Then you meet these people and you see someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and you see an extremely kind person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Carolyn. We're going to take another short break, and we'll be right back.
That was fast.
You've been watching Off the Page today, and we've been talking about Shambhala training, Shambhala Buddhism. Carolyn, according to Buddhist beliefs, what happens when you die?
Well, you find that out when you die. Your mind and your body, well, your body dissolves. Buddhists do believe that there is something that continues, and that's partly your sanity, and it's also could be all the habitual tendencies that you've accumulated in your life. So you have to kind of go forward into the unknown.
But you carry some things with you.
Well, so they say. I mean, you know, in a certain way, it's something that we're all going to have to find out for ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Okay.
And thanks for
having
watching
me.
Off the Page. I'll see you again next time.